The Soviet Union began its existence in 1917, but the modern U.S. imperialist war drive began in 1898, the Spanish-American War. This alone should prove that something else is involved, other than fear of Soviet attack. And we could add now that more than a decade and a half after the collapse of the Soviet Union, this war drive is not only continuing relentlessly, in fact, it's intensified. So let me just say that when we speak of imperialism, we're speaking specifically of Lenin's understanding of imperialism as a stage of capitalism. In 1916, Lenin, who led the Russian Revolution, wrote a book a year before the revolution's victory, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. Because sometimes imperialism is used broadly, and it might even mean other stages of human history, like the Roman Empire. But we're using the Marxist-Leninist term. Capitalism, like feudalism and chattel slavery before it, it's a system of economic exploitation, whereby a minority class becomes wealthy, not by being smarter or even luckier, but by exploiting the labor power of the vast majority of people, the working class. Capitalist competition, it forces each individual capitalist that's in competition with every other one. They have to try to maximize their profits. They have to more efficiently exploit the workers than the next capitalist. They seek profits. We also call that surplus value. Surplus value is a portion of the worker's labor which he or she is not paid for, and which ends up in the pockets and the bank accounts of the capitalist in the form of profit. So this leads to this whole economic cycle of boom and bust, because when you have all the means of production owned by a handful of wealthy elite, and they owe their existence as an exploiting class to the exploitation of the vast majority of everyone else, they cannot pay us enough to buy back what we produce. So we have these periodic recessions and depressions, and the competition intensifies, and you find some capitalists get richer than ever before and others are ruined. So each cycle leads to a greater concentration of wealth in fewer and fewer hands, and it led to, by Lenin's time, and we trace it in this country to 1898 in the war with Spain, to the stage of monopoly capitalism, where very few hands control the wealth. And they keep fewer and fewer as time goes by. And this concentration of wealth is a need to keep expanding. So they got to where the limits of their own national borders were not enough for them to continue as a class, to continue enriching itself. And that's why we call it a built-in war drive. It's not just greed, and they've got plenty of greed, but they got to go all over the world. And they conquered the world's territory. They colonized the world, Britain, France, Germany, and then later they realized it was more efficient to just colonize these countries economically. They didn't need the formality of a territory belonging to another country, but they dominated the economies, and that was neo-colonialism, a higher stage of imperialism. So anyway, so this is what we need to understand, and I don't want to go into depth, I want to leave time for discussion, but we need to understand that all these wars, throughout the history of capitalism, throughout the history of its imperialist phase, they're not just caused by bad individuals, greedy individuals, but the collusion between the politicians and the banks and the corporations and the military. It's a pattern. It's a pattern that's been repeating itself for over a century. We want to stop that pattern. We want to stop it. The drive for conquest persists to this day. And the struggle to end war must be a struggle to cut it off at its source, this bloody system of capitalist exploitation. I'm going to just end with a quote from the end of the book. Sanity will prevail. Because it's so, this world, it just can be so gloomy. If you don't have this revolutionary optimism, you can just wallow in just being down about the situation. We have shown in the course of this book, and see, I'm skipping everything in between because I want everybody to read it if you haven't read it. So I'm just reading the
I just thought you read the first
and the last page, so that, you know, and also to inspire myself to go back and actually
and read the middle.
read it. So, sanity will prevail. We have shown in the course of this book how the U.S. capitalist imperialist system, that is big business, financed and spearheaded by the big banks, who put in their own agents to run the government, is a system that is irrevocably committed to war. A system that must have war in order to survive. All the sane people of the world want peace, but the road to peace goes straight up to the monstrous obstacle of the built-in U.S. war drive, which is really U.S. imperialism itself, the U.S. capitalist system. Only the overthrow of this repressive, reactionary, hateful, anachronistic system can smash the built-in war drive once and for all. This inevitably includes the inevitable revolt of millions of people and the inevitable existence and development of those individuals who will fight the hardest, plan the most wisely, and sacrifice the most freely to make that revolt into a successful socialist revolution. Thus, there can be no better profession nor any greater destiny for the individual than to devote herself or himself to the party that has the built-in program to prepare and lead that revolution. Workers' Will Party. And that would be a good conclusion, but I just to show that there is hope, let me just quote from this, because, you know, Marxists believe in dialectics, which is the science of change, and things are always changing, and sometimes they change for the worse, but not always. Anyways, in 1980, Vince Copeland wrote, the U.S., Exxon Oil in this case, can extract most of the wealth out of Venezuela, not anymore.